All dark. It looks like I am live. Hello folks, it's another absolutely glorious Friday in Oxfordshire. So I've been able to get out and about. I got to my halfway point and it's a great point to stop. I'll just show you where I am, because what the question, just before we start, the question that I've had from several people, two different questions is, one is, oh, you need to tell us where you are every time, their places look so great. So that's Oxfordshire's other river. That's not the River Thames, that's the River Cherwell, and the Cherwell is, you can see the bike in the background, we'll get to that in a moment. Now the Cherwell, if you want to look it up, interestingly, it's one of those English words that we still spell and say in the old way. So although it said Cherwell, it's still spelt Cherwell, like it was in the old days, like Clark, Derby, Berkshire, words like that. And the other thing is that bit, what you see behind, that's actually a ford. It's too deep to ride through because you'll get your wheel bearings wet, but it's just deep enough to wade through the bike on your shoulder. So that's where I'm going afterwards, and then off into the countryside into a bird reserve. So that's where I am. If you want to look it up on the map, the ford at Islip over the River Cherwell. And for those who've asked, hey, what kind of bike is that? It looks a bit weird. It is, in fact, a Surly Karate Monkey in fixed gear format, and the gearing, for those who are interested in such things, is 3217, which is just right for sort of flat Oxfordshire. Even when it's muddy, you can kind of get through stuff. Karen, welcome back. Happy Friday, she says. Happy Friday indeed. It is for me. Well, it might not be for the company we're going to be talking about today. So let's crack on with the topic that you can see above, below, or to the side, depending on whether you're watching on laptop or phone. And Therese, hi from Dublin. Hi, Therese. I hope we get Teresa from Ottawa. She's a regular viewer as well. So if you're not here yet, Teresa, welcome when you arrive, or if you watch later. So today's topic, as you can see, is this thing called Clearview AI. Now, I'm assuming that many of you will know what that is. It's all about facial recognition, and it's kind of contentious. So basically, as I understand it, what Clearview AI did, started by an Australian fella, it's now a company that operates in the US out of New York. They set about doing facial recognition in a really cool way. So they decided, let's build a facial recognition engine that can go out on the internet, that can scoop up all the images that are out there that people have put up publicly. We're not going to go after private stuff. We're not going to go breaking into accounts again. We're just going to collect images that are already there, images that say, hey, this is Paul Ducklin, and that is Therese Malone from Dublin, or whoever it might be. And we will extract the identity of the person, or a way of recognizing that person in the image, build up a huge database so that we can offer image search, reverse image search, on a level that no one else is doing. So let's try and be technologically cool and innovative and build this technology, and then let's figure out what to do with it. And according to their founder, they spent about 2 years doing this, and they built the technology so that they could reliably process billions and billions, as he put it in an interview in March, of images, and come up with this reliable way that you could present an image of an unknown person, and it would go away and say, you know what, that looks like Paul Ducklin because we've got 20 images on file and it seems to match the characteristics. And as you can imagine, they found that a sweet spot in the market for this kind of thing was law enforcement. Because you can imagine, if there's been a lawful surveillance, you've got a photograph. In the old days, going through mug shots, it was very, very complicated for the cops to do that. It was complicated to acquire mug shots, to distribute them, to remember what they looked like. However, the good thing about mugshots in the old days is that the extent to which it sort of was felt to intrude on people's privacy was kind of limited by the fact that they were mugshots. They had to be printed out, they had to be distributed, you had to know where to look, and you couldn't collect a mugshot of everyone in the world well indexed in advance, so the mugshots tended to follow investigations that had gone before, and so on and so on. So in the old days, it was kind of felt to be a sort of necessary evil that was very helpful to law enforcement. They could go, whoa, we saw this guy, we know he's a suspect, we know who he is, he met this other fella that we didn't know who it was. When we looked at our mugshots, boy, we found that he's been involved in criminal activities before, and so the investigation takes shape. So you can imagine a reverse image search that's collated images of billions of people all across the world, say from social networks, will be very handy for law enforcement, and that's what Clearview AI found. And they're very proud of this, and they've got every right to be. However, it didn't go that well for them because people kind of bristled at this idea, thinking, you know what, I may have published this, I may have made this image public on the internet so that people know, hey, that's me at the River Cherwell, at the ford, at Islip in Oxfordshire. I'm not intending that to be a secret, but do I intend that to become something that law enforcement can use for years and years and years and years without my say-so? Well, there was a class action suit brought against Clearview at the beginning of this year, as I understand it, and it was brought in the state of Illinois. Not just because Illinois is economically pretty strong, because it's home to Chicago, the third biggest metropolis in the US, so it has quite some influence, but because Illinois, of all states and territories in the US, has the strongest laws about biometric data. And that's called BIPA, I hope I get this right, the Biometric Information Protection Act. And as far as the Illinoisans or the Illinois legislature is concerned, taking an image is one thing. A photograph doesn't count, according to their law. Explicitly says this. A photograph is not biometric identification. But if you process it to create what is essentially a face print, so that you can match other images of it later, then you have created a biometric identifier, like a fingerprint or DNA or anything of that sort. And that's covered by this BIPA Act that says you're perfectly entitled to do that, but you have to get the consent of the person first. So you can have the picture, you can extract the face print, but before you're allowed to do anything with it, you have to ask them, do you mind? Now, I would imagine that most people, if they were asked, they'd either ignore the request or they just go, no, what's in it for me? I don't know what you guys think. Anyone listening, let us know in the comments whether you think you would consent or not. I don't think I would, not because I'm against law enforcement, just because I kind of figure, you know what, the more that's collected about me, the more likely is something that might go wrong, for example, if there's a data breach. And ironically, this Clearview company, they did suffer a data breach this year, and in another irony, it wasn't the biometric data, fortunately, that was stolen. It was actually, apparently, a list of their customers, which turned out perhaps to be a little bit broader in brush than just law enforcement, like you might have expected. And that also got people's backs up because they figured that, well, you could, in theory, sell this, or this software could be used by anybody, not just law enforcement, where at least I can see there might be a clear and good reason for them doing it. So they faced this lawsuit at the beginning of the year, but the big deal is just yesterday, Thursday, the 28th of May, 2020, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, started their own civil action together with 4 community groups in the state of Illinois, in the Chicago area, basically with the intention, obviously, as civil suits usually do in the United States, they want to get some financial relief, so there wants to be some financial cost. But mainly their argument, what they say is they want to stop Clearview from collecting what is essentially an inappropriate, unlicensed, unregistered, no good biometric database that is an intrusion on the privacy of everybody in Illinois, and by implication the rest of the United States, and presumably by implication the rest of the world. And of course, Clearview's point of view, hey, we're innovators, we may have done reverse image search better than anybody else. How can you criticize us for essentially building a better mousetrap? We've not gone after private images. We've not done surveillance that goes and snoops on people and gets images that they didn't intend. We're going to images that they've published anyway. What is the problem? And of course, the ACLU is taking the contrary point, saying you're not just collecting images. As you mentioned before, under the BIPA Act, actually what you're doing is you're making a biometric database. You should have asked permission. Then you would have found out whether people were keen or not keen on this by the number of people that consented. So this is likely, well, as we wrote on nakedsecurity.sophos.com in an article we published today, the day in court, I think it's sometime towards the end, maybe the 25th of September this year is apparently when the case is scheduled. You imagine, as is the nature of this thing, it's quite a huge exercise. Either it might be finished beforehand by some kind of settlement or an agreement, or it might take a lot longer than a day in court. But that's when we're going to find out what the court in Illinois thinks about this biometric data. Is this just innovation using public data, or does it genuinely count as biometrics, and maybe Clearview have to stop? So we don't know the answer to that yet. That's going to be difficult to say. It's not for us to guess what the court is going to find, but it's certainly not going that well for Clearview, not least because they've got other foes who have entered in sometime in in the middle of the first part of this year. I think I'm trying to say somewhere between March and May. I can't remember the exact month. They actually found that they had opponents who might be more difficult to deal with, say, than the Circuit Court of Illinois. Namely, at least Facebook, Google and Twitter, independently and together, if you like, decided, you know what, this is against the terms and conditions of us getting those images uploaded by people on our services. So Facebook owns obviously Facebook and Instagram, Google owns Google search engine and of course YouTube, which is a fantastic source of video images. Twitter is all about image sharing and chatting and identifying who you are. Those three said, you know what, this is no good in terms of our terms and conditions. You don't have a license to do that. Wow, here come, you're probably going to see, you might be seeing some horses because this is a bridleway, so let's hope so. So Facebook, Google and Twitter all said you can't do that, and it looks as though what they mean is we don't want to do a commercial deal with you because even though we may be criticised for the amount we collect, we don't invite people to upload images for that purpose. For them to be turned into biometrics. We're not doing it ourselves. So it looks as though even if Clearview said, okay, let's reach a commercial settlement, we'll pay for access to it, it looks as though those three major sources of image to name conversions are going to be off their menu anyway. So how this pans out remains to be seen. But the main reason for me doing this video today is to give you two pieces of advice that I think this whole court case situation reminds us. And that is whether Clearview wins and they've got the right to be innovative with data that's public anyway, or whether the ACLU wins and this is seen as something that from a privacy point of view we don't want to do. You can be sure that because this data is publicly available, because it can be scraped, there's going to be somebody scraping it and they're not going to be open and have a big marketing campaign about it like Clearview. So they're not going to be in the eye of saying, okay, so if Clearview has to give up, my point, then it's not going to stop that information being public and being scrapable and possibly being abused by people who weren't supposed to have it in the first place. In just the same way that in most countries of the world, it's illegal to write and use malware to get unauthorized access to people's computers. There are very strict laws about it. They carry very significant sentences, but although that's probably had some effect on malware infections, it hasn't caused malware as a threat or ransomware, stuff like that, to diminish at all. So I want to leave you with 2 points. The first is that the best way to avoid public images of you being used as a face print that lets you be identified and put in context with your friends and family in the future is to limit what you share. So if in doubt, don't give it out. In particular, if you want to share photos of yourself, stop and think how much they're giving away. In other words, are your kids in the photo? Are you outside your home address? Are you revealing stuff about your employment that you're meant to keep to yourself because of the nature of your contract? All that stuff. So think before you share, and as I say, if in doubt, don't give it out. And more importantly, because this does admittedly take some of the fun out of the modern internet, treat yourself as an opt-in service. And by that I mean, if you take a photo and it's a fun photo and your chums are in it and you think this is a great thing to put on Facebook, ask them first. And if anybody has any doubt or says, no, I'd rather you didn't share it, then just let it go. Don't go, well, I took the photo, I think it's great, I think I can make a meal out of this, I think this is fantastic, I'm going to post it anyway. Basically, if you treat other people's choice about whether to have your pictures of them published as opt-in, in other words, they get to choose, then it's much more reasonable for you to expect other people to do that for you. So thanks for listening, everybody. When it comes to posting images online, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I think it's great fun. It's nice to show people your surroundings. It's nice to, particularly in lockdown days, to show people that there is an outdoors after all, and it can be quite pleasant. But just make sure, A, that you aren't giving away more than you might later want other people to find, because whether the law says they're not supposed to take it or not, somebody's going to try. And be respectful of other people's privacy when you've got images that include them, or when it comes to tagging other people in images. So thanks for listening, and until next time, folks, stay secure. And now I get to wade across the ford after I've pressed the finish button. I'm getting better at it.